Hey everybody, I hope you all are doing well and welcome back to Michael's Matters. And today, as we get the new numbers that show inflation, it's showing that inflation is going back up across the country. And this is a change in the direction from the previous months where we saw the inflation trend actually trending down. But moreover, this could mean a very stressful 2024 for the nearly 70 million folks on Social Security and retirees in the United States if this trend keeps going up. So today, we're going to talk about why things are once again getting more expensive and what it means for those folks on fixed incomes through programs like Social Security. So that could be Social Security Retirement, which obviously is the majority of folks, but also Social Security Disability SSDI, Supplemental Security Income SSI, as well as survivors and spousal benefits, and really all the iterations of Social Security benefits. Now, before we get to the video though, if you like this video, if you find it interesting, if you find it helpful, or hey, if you at least find it useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe because it really does help the channel grow and we are so thankful for that. Thank you. But also because you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. All right, now let's get down to the video. So let's start off today by going from the general to the specifics. And that means that we're going to start with the overall inflation number that was just released today, put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS, which is the government organization that keeps track of how much the things cost every year. And in their most recent report from December 2023, that is the most recent report that came out, it shows that the cost of everything of inflation started to go back up to a point of 3.4%. That is up from the previous months where it had bottomed out at 3.1%. What this means in the larger sense is that despite what we hear from the Federal Reserve or from the White House, inflation is not a solved problem. And in fact, with the turn towards an increase, this could be in the very beginning of an upward trend that last month started to outstrip the increase in benefits, that 3.2% increase that Americans got on their Social Security benefits that started in January. Now, why this is important is because each month that rate of inflation is higher than the COLA increase, it means that seniors, retirees, and older Americans ultimately can end up buying less things with those dollars and cents they receive each and every month from their Social Security benefits. If we want to look at that from a real world dollars and cents perspective to figure out just how much benefits like Social Security are being undercut by this increased inflation, we can just look at the difference between how much the average Social Security beneficiary gets in the United States versus how much prices of things are going up. So for example, the average Social Security benefit in the United States as of November, which is the most recent that we have, was $1,844 a month. With that COLA increase of 3.2% that everybody got on Social Security in January, that means the average Social Security benefit went up by $59 up to $1,903 a month. But as of December, with inflation being at 3.4%, that would also mean that the average Social Security beneficiary check would need to go up to $1,907 instead to accurately equate for the cost of things inflated at 3.4%. Or to put it directly, seniors are able to buy $3.07 less worth of things like gas, groceries, and necessities than they were in the previous months, with benefits being undercut even by just a few dollars, $3.07 in this case. It all ultimately does add up over the years and over the decades and can leave folks in, well, a pretty financially precarious positions that many retired Americans are currently in, and they have to essentially unretire or go back to work or move in with family members just to survive. So that is one side of all of this, but another thing to consider is going to be how these new inflation numbers could potentially affect Social Security benefits next year, specifically how much it's going to affect the increase for next year, because although we are not in the test period for the cost of living adjustment or COLA increase yet, we can start to look at the patterns that are showing themselves to get an idea of where that might actually be heading. Now, just as a reminder, the actual test period for how much are someone's Social Security benefits increased are based off an average rate of inflation for the 3 months that make up the third quarter of the year. So July, August, and September. And then, of course, it's announced in October. The measure of inflation that is used by Social Security to get these numbers is different than that general inflation number that we just talked about, or as it's called, the CPIU. But rather, they use the CPIW, which is a basket of goods that are consumed by the average urban wage worker. That basket of goods, that includes things like food and shampoo and toothpaste and maybe, I don't know, cat condos, things like that. And those prices of those goods in those baskets are compared year over year. And whatever the difference is in those pricing, percentage-wise, is what makes up the CPIW inflation rate. And then those 3 months inflation rates from Q3 averaged together is what makes a COLA. Voila, right? So all that being said, the CPIW for December also went up at a slightly lower amount than the CPIU at 3.3%, which is pretty typical. The CPIW normally comes in a little bit lower as far as inflation goes than the general inflation metric. And that kind of is one of the big culprits. Why folks on Social Security, why their cost of living increases don't ever seem to actually match up with the actual overall cost of life is because the COLA is pegged to that CPIW, which tends to be lower than the CPIU. Now, although December has a slightly lower rate of increase of inflation for the CPIW than the CPIU does, it doesn't mean that benefits are going to be affected negatively just yet. Because, of course, reminder, the COLA increase is based off the 3 months average. So the 3 month average of the CPIW is what matters. And with December numbers included, it puts that CPIW still below that 3.2% increase that folks got in January at 3.13%. So from this metric, seniors are still ahead, just barely, but not when we compare to the overall CPIU or the universal inflation, which of course is still disconcerting. Now, last up for today, I want to talk about a much more specific inflation metric that really gives us a better diagram of how seniors' benefits are faring against the true inflation that seniors are actually feeling in their pocketbooks. This is because the CPIU measures inflation for everybody, and the CPIW measures inflation for the urban clerical wage earner. But seniors actually have a set of costs that are more expensive in some areas, like things like healthcare and medications, than either the general population or the average urban wage workers. And ultimately, what this means is that sometimes their costs, that seniors that they have, are not fairly accounted for under these two metrics. But there is a metric called the CPIE, or the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, that does a much better job of recording these costs and showing how the economies that seniors live in, how that inflation rates can be very different from the general inflations that are being used to calculate their benefits. To that end, the inflation numbers under the CPIE for December show that seniors specifically had an inflation rate that was at 3.69% just for the month of December, and for a 3-month average at 3.67%. Over that 3-month average. I mean, that amount is a very sizable difference than when we compare to the other two metrics. Again, when we compare that, we can see that the average Social Security benefit that went to $1,903 a month in January, that went to beneficiaries who are actually experiencing a level of inflation that would have required a payment of $1,912 a month to fairly compensate, or $9 more a month than they are actually getting on average. So that is, of course, if the CPIE is to be believed. And with numbers like that, I mean, $9 is considerably a lot more than, $3. It's basically 300% more. But even $9 as a real, just kind of actual number is a lot. And it means that seniors really start to feel that difference because $9 turns into real dollars and not just a couple cents one way or the other. So overall, what does these most recent inflation numbers say about the situation that seniors are in? Well, it seems like first there is that shift in tide in inflation, where the inflation tide was going out and the cost of things were not rising as fast as they were before. But now that tide may be coming back in and bringing the cost of everything back into the other direction, that is going up. At the moment, though, it is still too soon to tell whether or not this is a trend, because 1 month does not make a trend. But my money is that the current folks in the White House are going to do really whatever it takes, no matter how much of a long-term sacrifice for short-term economic stability it may bring, to bring down interest rates, at least until the election, the so-called Grand Bidenomics plan. But we will have to see how that all works out. But at the moment, this year is starting off with things looking like the inflation fight and the fight for Social Security benefits that actually line up with the actual cost of life. Well, that just hasn't been settled. All right, so that's it for today's Michael's Matters, and I really hope that you enjoy this video, and I hope that you found it interesting or helpful, or hey, even at least useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really does help the channel grow, and we are so thankful for that. Thank you. But also because you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. So for Michael's Matters, I'm Michael, hoping that you take care of yourself, take care of others, and have a happy, healthy day.